So in our effort to stay on time to show up the other room, we're going to get started. So we have Care Without Boundaries, Tina, Carly, and Sarah. You guys can take it away.
So we are the Care Without Boundaries team from Napanee, which is in the southeast region. So we wanted to focus on this project because from our many years of experience working in the healthcare system as nurses and care coordinators, we have unfortunately noticed the inefficiencies and inequities in care for patients with complex conditions requiring multiple service providers. When we started, we hoped to have an impact at the system level that would positively impact patients and providers. Our theory was that if we strengthen the relationships between providers, specifically those that are carrying out a care coordination role, we can enable a process where providers work collaboratively with the patient. Our theory was that if there was a lead care coordinator, it would streamline care, reduce duplication, and decrease confusion for the patient, ultimately providing a better patient experience.
Our aim statement was for 25 patients of Dr. Ganyu, who's a local family physician in our area, that require multiple care coordination services, that they would have a primary contact or lead care coordinator, and that lead care coordinator would be clearly identified by all participating care coordinators. And we would hope to achieve that by February 2019. We're still working on it. Given that we were trying to engage and impact providers across the healthcare sectors from different organizations, one of the most important diagnostic tools that we used was the process map. It was enlightening to start to put together the patient's journey from their perspective, rather than from one organization's silo and their perspective. It quickly highlighted redundancies, gaps, and the numerous providers that patients have to work with. Using the opportunities from that process map, we then developed a survey to give to providers. We asked the providers what they thought were the most important issues to tackle. From the responses, we were able to develop a Pareto, which helped us understand where to start.
And based on the diagnostics we completed and our understanding of the baseline data, we decided to start our PDSA cycles. So based on the results of the Pareto diagram, the most important issue that was identified by providers was the lack of communication between the care team. From this, we decided to develop and test two PDSAs. The first was finding a standard location in the provider's EMR where the care team for the patient could be identified and tracked, because after we went out and met with lots of the stakeholders, it was determined that there wasn't one individual place in anyone's EMR that the whole care team was being identified. And the second PDSA we decided to start was the care team huddle, and we've had our first huddle, and that's hopefully on a weekly rotation where we can all come together as the stakeholders in our community and really get to know each other's role and focus on how we're providing our services to our common patients. And so the data showed that the initial results from the PDSA was that first and foremost the providers are engaged in working together to find a solution to better patient care, and the primary care office has already implemented a process to document the care team in their EMR, and there was lots to consider around finding that specific location and what we need to be able to pull from that location going forward. And with the primary care office has connected with their mental health and addictions partners in the community to implement a process to better communicate changes in the care team for their common patients. So the mental health team is kind of working to develop processes and policies on how they can send standard information to the primary care doctors to make that communication easier. And additionally, provider surveys results prior to the first care team huddle showed positive relationships between providers, but inconsistent knowledge of patient information and who was involved in their care.
Okay, so our next steps. We will continue to work on the two PDSAs. We're looking to engage more organizations within that first cohort and implement the standardized practice for recording the care team in their EMRs. We will also continue to have those weekly huddles, and we want to really monitor staff satisfaction and experience throughout that process.
So our biggest challenges were scoping our project to a manageable level and developing measures that would appropriately measure change. Since we were trying to tackle a system-level change, it was hard to try to scope that down to a single project. Additionally, since we are working with providers across the healthcare sector, finding data that represented the breadth of the providers we were working with was difficult. We had to implement measures locally.
And so our advice for anyone starting on a QI journey is to pick an easier project. But really to dedicate the time to understanding the issue you want to tackle and engaging the stakeholders. We think one of the most successful aspects of our project has been the relationships that are being built throughout the process. The providers feel engaged. They've responded to us that they feel excited and are engaged in working forward, and they're part of building the solution for better patient care. While it is difficult to measure, it is potentially one of the most important outcomes for a sustainable solution. And then through the engagement, we feel that you can capture the power of the team to push ahead and attempt system change.
Excellent, thank you. I'm shocked to hear there isn't consistency amongst EMRs. Aren't you shocked to hear that? Comments, questions, curiosity? Francine.
So this is a topic near and dear to my heart. I'm a member of the sandwich generation, so I've got a kid with a complex care team and a parent with a complex care team. So I've seen it from both sides, and it's messy. You work with a number of different team members who are all in their individual silos. Did you find anything that facilitated building those relationships that you could share with us, a learning?
I think from working on the front line, just going out and really engaging with them and noticing or voicing that I feel probably a level of stress that they may also share, because we are both trying to work within our silos, yet sometimes overlap and tackle the same problems. And if I'm doing this, why are you doing this, and who should be doing this? And then ultimately reflecting back on how the patient's feeling and all of that, and trying to keep them at the center of the care. So I think really reaching out and going outside of your silo and saying, you know, I'm highly stressed too, and what can we do to come together and try and keep our focus to the patient and streamline it for their care.
Just a tack-on question. Because of all the silos, where did you find the best place for leadership driving something that was going across sectors? Who is the best to hold it?
I would say a lot of it came from HealthLinks, really pulling together that team to make sure that the patient's identified goals were being met. When we first started the mapping and really looking at, you know, who was involved after a hospital discharge for these patients, that's when we noticed that patients had up to 40 people entering their home the first week of hospital discharge, and it was maddening to that patient. The patient had no idea who was entering the home. They didn't have any idea of what organization they were from, you know, and then HealthLinks would go in and try to understand all of these people and then pull them together as a team, and it's hard to pull together 40 people to try to get them on the same page.
How did you manage the tricky issue of privacy when you were talking about huddles or grand rounds? I know it's been an issue that has been tackled by many HealthLinks teams, and I'm just curious how you managed it yourselves.
So we just have the patient sign a consent form identifying these are your people in your circle of care. So we
And does each huddle then only talk about one patient? I guess we found that we would bring together a team and we were talking about multiple patients, but not all providers were involved in each patient's care. But maybe I'm not understanding the huddle.
So they're all patients of Dr. Ganyu. So it's her practice that we've been focusing on. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks.
Francine, I see you nodding about that privacy. From your experience, do you want to share a little bit about how did privacy impact your experience? Were there concerns?
You sign a lot of consent forms, and half the time you're not looking at who you're giving consent to. So privacy it is an issue. I think it's an issue that needs to be tackled, but from a patient perspective, it kind of disappears because you more care about the care you're receiving than who's reading your charts. There's immediate concerns that privacy is not one of them, at least from my perspective and parents I've spoken to.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I didn't plant that answer, by the way. I've lost track of time. Claire, do I have time for one more question? We have time for one more question. Who's curious? Complex patients. Some of us are in that sandwich generation, right? What are you curious about?
One more question.
Yeah.
If you could, so HealthLinks is often criticized as being like a system that needs to just create spider webs over silos. And so, or maybe I just think that. If you could rebuild the system from scratch today, what would the one thing be that you would do?
Well, I think Tina and I really go back to our years. Tina spent time up in the Northwest Territories, and I spent time in Northern Ontario in really small, remote communities. And there was one community health center, you know, that staffed your nurses, your PSWs, everybody under one roof. And often you were the jack of all trades. You were going out all hours of the day and night to support your community. So if we could, we always say we want to go back and work in that model because it's so simple, it's so easy. So that's really where we'd like to see us get to.
So one governance, one organization, all working on one team.
And hand in hand with the primary care, because they're leading the medical side of it, but they also know that they rely on the community aspects, and you're their partner in that. It's not so much of the hierarchy and the kind of flatten out the lines.
I was just thinking, like, we have similar issues often too, where we have multiple organizations coming in to help to service our clients, and they get lost sometimes in who is everybody's role. Do you use care conferencing often amongst agencies, like inter-agency care conferencing?
All the time, yes.
Good, thank you, ladies. You can progress over that way. Oh, see, after lunch, we lose our learning. H.J. McFarland Memorial Home, Prince Edward County, Rachel and Stephanie. Oh, Rachel and somebody.
And then there was one. We're almost done. My name is Rachel, and I'm the resident quality supervisor at H.J. McFarland in the county. Steph was unfortunately not able to be here today, but I am supported by my lovely administrator, Kim. So I thank her for coming and holding my hand through this process. We titled our project, Increasing Residents' Access to External Care Providers in Long-Term Care. We chose this focus for our project loosely based on the results of our annual resident satisfaction surveys. The feedback that we collected highlighted an area for improvement in residents' access to external care providers. This finding was rather vague, and so we decidedly needed more investigation. So our Ideas project started with surveying both residents and POAs to better clarify the services they meant by this. We had volunteers come into the home to complete the surveys with our residents, and we mailed out copies of the same surveys to the POAs and families with self-addressed envelopes so they could return them with increased compliance. And the results from these actually showed that dental and podiatry services were the most identified need by both groups. Out of scope, we found that physio, out of home, chaplain, mental health services, naturopaths, optometry, and audiology were also identified. So staff and families also helped to identify numerous barriers in our ability to provide residents with specialized care, both in and outside of our home. Some of these include lack of physical transportation to and from appointments, either just by families not being able to provide this, or just our lack of community services, which include like a taxi service and one bus to service all of the Quinte region. The proximity of the home to services, just because we're in a pretty rural setting, and specialized services being mostly in like Belleville, Kingston area, which is about an hour outside of the county. It also identified in these surveys that family would like more support from the home in obtaining access to these services, and they expressed frustration in regards to getting their loved ones seen by a care provider, example dentistry, as they felt that they were left to arrange these appointments on their own. And usually a lot of our POAs are from out of town, and the processes and local services and supports are unknown to them. So another challenge that presented itself with that is just taking residents out of the home in general who have cognitive impairments, just because a lot of behaviors would ensue once they arrived at the clinic, and they would either refuse the care or just the providers would be unable to safely perform the assessments and the tasks. But the biggest need that we noticed and the driver for our AIM statement was identified when we started looking at residents who were identified with abnormal findings on their quarterly head-to-toe assessments in the RI-MDS. So these would include like a broken tooth or severe decay or plaque buildup or any kind of concerns with their feet. We found these concerns were being identified by staff, but the residents were not being offered a referral to a service to assist with this concern at all, or just in a timely manner. When we started this project, we hoped to increase the quality of life for our residents by being able to rectify some of these issues in a timely manner. And when we looked at the bigger picture, it was clear that our residents with oral issues had decreased intake, probably related to pain. And this was the same for our residents with foot concerns. Mobility was affected, again, related to pain. So our goal was to help alleviate some of the suffering and hopefully increase their enjoyment and active participation in their ADLs. Our theory was that the frontline staff, or the process from frontline staff such as PSWs identifying these concerns, reporting it to registered staff assessing, documenting it, notifying the POAs, getting a hold of the appropriate practitioner, being offered a referral was just very fragmented, and often involved multiple staff on multiple shifts, giving an increased opportunity for miscommunications. This led to our AIM statement, which was by April 2019, 60% of residents with abnormal findings in scheduled PRN head-to-toe assessments will be offered a referral to dental services, podiatry services, or both. Our measures included an outcome measure of number of monthly referrals offered to external care partners, process measure being percentage of assessments with abnormal findings, percentage of assessments that were incomplete or incorrect, and balance measures of course, increased workload to registered staff and capacity assessment, or capacity enhancement, sorry. In order to understand more about our project, we completed some Pareto charts with the survey results from both the residents and the POAs, and we completed additional charts with the baseline data of average amount of time that head-to-toe assessments were completed past due, which was quite common, and completed multiple PDSA cycles for initiating new documentation headings for registered staff and tracking forms related to the referral process. We found that the PDSA forms were to be the most helpful as we collected staff feedback regarding why the tools were not being utilized. We were able to make simple adjustments and provide some education about the importance of them. We often found the forms were missing, hiding in piles of paperwork in the nursing station, or just incomplete in general. We took the staff's feedback into account and made the tracking form more accessible on actual long legal paper, so it just couldn't hide as easily. And staff is actually a little bit more diligent about documenting under the right heading under point-click care, which is great. So the goal of creating this specific note was to actually ease in the accessibility and follow up on referrals and concerns. So if staff were documenting under like a dental referral note instead of just a progress note, you could search through those and just pull out the specific ones instead of sorting through like pages and pages of progress notes under point-click care. While this project was going on, we met one of our change ideas as we developed a new relationship with a foot care nurse in the area, and she's been coming in on a weekly basis to see our residents. We currently have all of our residents requesting foot care being seen and have a turnaround time of approximately a week for those who have identified concerns and the referral being offered. We chose the referral being offered kind of as our goal, as not all of them will actually accept the care, but we just want to at least offer that service to them. We've also refreshed our relationship with our dental hygienist, who's come in on a monthly basis to see residents who have been having identified issues. Our biggest challenge to date was keeping our team members. No, it was actually identifying baseline data. As when we go back into point-click care to look at the past head-to-toe assessments, we can see when they're completed, but not when they were originally due to be completed. So collecting that discrepancy between the two dates is impossible. But we've since started tracking that once we identified that that was a hole in our baseline data. And it was also the same thing with the progress notes about referrals being offered because they were documented under a general progress note, and going back through months and months and months of them just wasn't feasible for every single resident in the home. So our next step is just to continue building with this progress and hopefully apply that to some of the other external care providers that the home would like to see, and to apply the QI model to other areas in the home, such as Fall's program. So, and we wanted to say a big thank you to Agnes for all your support back there. Hi. And yeah, this has been truly enjoyable, so thank you.
Thank you. What are you curious about?
Are you seeing a big difference? Like, so you increase the offers of care. Is
Yeah.
there, what's the variance between offer and accept? Is it remarkably different than when you were not offering as much?
I would say yes, just because it wasn't really even being offered. And so now that families are more aware that we can actually provide those services to them, they're quite happy to accept that and have that burden taken off of them of like trying to book transportation, trying to find a care provider that will even see their parent depending on their diagnoses. Most of the time when we're offering a referral, it is being accepted.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Your solutions were great, and they seem small, kind of incremental changes. But in terms of implementing those changes, was there a lot of education of your staff to implement those changes, those sorts of things? How big was it, even though the change was small?
It had to be on a small scale as well. Like, it was mostly just meeting with our registered staff in the nursing station, catching them at like shift change, because we sent out a few feedback forms to them and they weren't really being completed. We tried to hold some meetings and they were poorly attended, so it was honestly having to go find them on the floor and like making them listen to our little soapbox speech, so.
That's a lot of work. Good
It
job.
was.
What else are you curious about? Why I'm getting a sugar loaf from the cupcakes?
Yeah.
Lacey, go ahead.
Coming back to the highly adoptable change model, did you find challenges to explain the benefits beyond what's beneficial to residents?
Yeah, I think the balancing measure of the increased workload really put a lot of them off doing anything new or seeing the value in anything new. But I think that once we explained it and they saw that it really wasn't any more effort than just scrolling through that box a little bit more to see the right note or to write it on a different form, then it wasn't so bad. But the initial reaction is definitely like, whoa, no.
Anybody else? All right, thank you very much. So just as we wait for the other room to catch up once again, I just want to make sure that you know that these posters are yours to take, your own, not somebody else's, but they are yours to take. But yeah, and they are, if you want to have another look at others, they are posted on campus. They're posted as one deck, I believe. By room, there we go. So if you did want to see what was going on in the other room as well. And you know, you created these posters with the files that you sent us. You take that file to any printer and they will be able to do this for you as well. And these are just paper, but you can certainly get them done in vinyl and more permanent and that sort of thing, and obviously color and all those lovely things as well. So these are great to post up. We talk about engaging others in your workplace. These are great ways to post up because they're kind of catchy and they got some visuals in them, so people really want to stop and have a look at them. So share your success by posting these as well. To reinforce, and it will be reinforced to you once we're all back together, and you've all said it today. This is Hotel California, right? You can check out, but you can never leave. And it's very true. And I think many of you who really thought that 5 months will see the back of everybody else's head and we'll be done, now realize that not only is that not true, but I heard a lot of you be very excited about that too, because you've brought yourself to a place where some really fun things are going to happen in the next while. And you've done so much hard work that it's not time to take your foot off the gas now. And many of you expressed that during your presentations as well. So in a moment, the wall is going to come up again. We have a final presentation, and we are going to pick your brains a little bit. So maybe I can sort of feed your thinking a bit. We're going to pick your brains a little bit at the end of the day, because for cohort 18, I realize you're 16, but 17 is in the works and about to graduate. We're looking at doing a number of things differently. So while we've got the experts in the room, the frontline workers, you as the participants, we're going to pick your brains a little bit about what's your best advice to us in terms of an advanced learning program like you've just gone through. What should we do more of? What should we do less of? We're really in the final, sorry, not the final stages, in the throes of brainstorming and coming up with new models around this. So I'll kind of plant those questions with you, and we'll spend a few minutes just debriefing with that at the end. But thank you. Congratulations to all of you. Congratulations on completing, but on great speeches today as well. Thank you. I'll just wait for the wall.
All right, 30-second heads up. We're going to move into our final speaker for the day. But never final learning, right, Sharon? We're always learning. So, reminder, in case I forget, when we're done officially, please take your poster home. Don't take another person's poster. That'll cause trouble. Thank you so much for all of the executive sponsors that took the time to attend in person. We really appreciate your support. Those of you that are out in the airwaves, thank you for joining us. I want us to welcome Lee Fairclough. She's the Vice President of Quality Improvement at Health Quality Ontario. She's going to facilitate a few closing remarks and more learning. So please warm up your hands for Lee. Thank you again.
Hi everyone, it's nice to see you all, and I've heard it was nice to hear the last presentation of today at a very minimum, and really look forward to taking in all the posters, which I will definitely do. Congratulations. I mean, today is a big day in this program. I've been to numerous of these graduations over the years, and I think actually what it symbolizes is that moment to really celebrate all the amazing work that you've done. And you know, I think that we know that work to improve care needs to be thoughtful, and it needs to bring teams together to do it. And it actually is not always the easiest work to do when we know that we've still got to care for patients every day in the way we usually do. So I just, again, I first of all want to thank all of you for being the leaders that you are to come forward, to participate in this program, and just really, really want to congratulate you all on what you've been able to achieve. Now, you've probably also heard, though, throughout this program that our hope is that it doesn't end here, that the idea is that we've been able to help to support the development of those skills that you might be able to then translate to other quality issues in your hospital, again, to motivate others to adopt practices that you've now proven have been successful, and really help to stimulate and inspire them to do that. And we hope that we'll find a way to keep you connected. So before I continue in my remarks, I am going to pose two questions to you, just so you can start thinking about them. And then we're going to come back to them after, okay? So the first question that I want to ask you, that I want to open up is, you know, how did you find the program? How could we support you even better in the future? This is our own quality improvement work. What could we emphasize more? What could we emphasize less? So that's the first question, and this is, you know, the place to give us some of that feedback. And the second thing is, what do you need from us after today? So what can we do to help to support you in your efforts to further spread and to further stay engaged in quality improvement, either within your organization, or I'm hoping to encourage you to even stretch beyond your organizations in the way that we need to come together across sectors to work on some of our most challenging healthcare quality issues. So those two questions I'm going to come back to. So start thinking about what your answers might be, and hopefully we can have a bit of a discussion and a dialogue. Well, one of the things that we always like to comment on, though, at this point, too, is to just talk a little bit about what is important and what is being emphasized for improvement across the health system at the moment. I think that we are hearing about several issues. We hear about them in the media. We hear about them certainly in the work that Health Quality Ontario does through programs like our Quality Improvement Plan program. We're trying to signal where do we see potential variations in care that exist, potential opportunities to make things even better for patients. And some of those themes that we see are how we can improve mental health care and services, I would say across all types of care settings. How we can address what's currently being called hallway health care that ultimately is going to require cross-sector approaches to improvement. This is not a hospital-only issue. This is about actually how we support patients in the best care setting possible. How do we increase access to long-term care that's much needed, and also recognize that as we increase care for people in the community, which I think that we've had some success in doing, what it means is that those that are entering long-term care are entering at a stage potentially in their conditions that is more advanced and more complex. So how do we even start thinking about care in that setting potentially a little bit differently? In our quality improvement plans, we've also emphasized a couple areas of focus that have been the focus of some of the quality standards that we've released. One has been some of the mental health care standards. The other has been pain management and the use of opioids specifically. And also, how can we, really contribute from a health system perspective to the issues of overdose deaths that we're seeing? And again, I say that very specifically as we know that that's a very complex problem that is not actually only restricted to what the healthcare system can do, but there are things that we can do, and there's ways that we can support people differently with substance use disorders, et cetera. The other area that we've included in the quality improvement plan for improvement is palliative and end-of-life care. And I actually was able to tune in for a few minutes to some of the broadcasts here today to hear that there was a talk on that today, particularly with a focus in Indigenous communities. So I'll be really keen to be sure to look at that poster today. But I do think that these are areas that they're tough areas. Most of them actually are going to require us not only to think about care within our very, very local settings, but are going to need us to think about how we're collaborating with our colleagues that work in other care environments. You need special tools to do that. And actually, you guys are equipped with them. So we're really lucky in this province. To date, we've had a lot of support for developing this kind of a skill set. That we recognize that actually we can't just expect healthcare professionals to just make everything better without actually giving them a bit of a tool set to do that. And you now have that, and we need to count on you to bring that toolkit to bear every day in the work that you're doing. The other thing that we're hearing is that we're hearing lots of things in the news about changes in our structures as a system. That may mean we need to work together differently in the future. But I will say one really great thing is that there's been a big emphasis on making sure that we're thinking about those at the front lines of care, that we're thinking about patients, and we're thinking about bringing about meaningful change at that interface. And again, I come to ideas, whenever I come to these graduations, actually everything we heard about today was largely that, I bet. Every other one I've been to, the last talk it was how are we thinking about engaging teams at the front line of care, and how are we thinking about improvement at that level? So, don't want to put too heavy a burden on you, but, I do hope that you'll step up to that challenge. And I think that this, is really important work. I mean, part of the mantra that we've had a little bit at Health Quality Ontario is that quality matters. And the fact is, quality does matter. Quality is actually what healthcare is about, is ensuring that we're delivering quality care to our patients. So with that, really, this is where I do want to kind of open it up to all of you. I've posed the question about how do we do in giving you the tool set and the toolkit and the resource that you need as a person to be a leader at the front lines and with your organizations. What's some of your feedback that you might have for us about what we could do more of or less of when we are together like this? And then we'll move to our second question, or you can answer both if you want, which is really about what do you need from us to help you continue to spread some of the ideas that you've had here today, or help others to do it. So who's got an idea first to share on either one of those questions? Just general feedback. I know Joey's going to pick somebody any minute, so you might as well just.
That's
put your
right.
hand
And just
up.
to remind folks to speak with the mic so that folks listening in can hear us.
Hi, thanks, Lee. Not sure how practical this would be, so I'm just off the top. It felt today like we're presenting material that we've presented before, and I appreciate that there is, you know, a live audience on the web or whatever that may not have that background. But throughout, we've presented our material to the group here a few times, and I'm
Right.
wondering if maybe. Could it be helpful to de-emphasize the topic and revisit the topic and place more emphasis on some of the tools and the applied learning? You know, we learned an awful lot through our coaches about the you know, data extraction and data, you know, analysis and those tools. It seemed the focus of our presentation is about the outcomes, and I suppose it should
Right.
be, but I guess where I'm going is trying to reinforce the learning of some of these tools that are really, really valuable. And is there an opportunity to emphasize some of that to reinforce the learning a little bit more?
Right, that's great. So just, that's a great suggestion. And, you know, I think what you're saying is just bringing into balance, like the ultimate outcomes that have been achieved, but also the fact, like you picked up these tools, this is what you're able to do, and a bit of a reminder of what they are as you go. Is that?
Yeah, just to solidify and bring it,
That's
but you
terrific.
know, I don't know where that balance lies, but I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, that's great. That's great feedback, great suggestion. Any other comments that people may have? Yeah, we've got a couple over here,
I'm sorry, who had their hand up?
right here.
I'm just thinking after the fact, like we've got to this point now, kind of where do you go from here? So yes, you've put this on us that you've got all these great tools and we can use it within our systems, but I don't know if there's something else that you can lead us to, or
Yeah.
is there another, like a stepping stone beyond this kind of, I mean, we plan on meeting with our leader, but, our leader, Shauna, you're our leader, but just trying to figure out
Yeah,
what to do with
what to
the
do with-
information.
Yeah, that's great. Can I make a few, like, just comment on a few? I mean, first of all, there's a virtual way that we currently connect, and I think you probably are all oriented to Quorum. And what I would suggest is that you've been using that to facilitate you as a group to go through your work. If you haven't explored the rest of it and some of the topics that are there, our intent in creating Quorum actually was to have a place for the quality improvement community to connect, share ideas, share successes, and actually comment and ask each other questions. So if you go into some of the public-facing things on Quorum, you will find others that are working on similar things to you, and you can pose questions and you can ask questions. The other thing I would encourage all of you to do is do a post on some of the experience that you've had doing this work. Anybody, we would welcome that for. And then what we will do is we will bring profile to that, and then others will do the same and engage with it. So that's like a very, very minimum place to stay connected, both within your group that you've come together with, but more generally now as part of that broader HQO community. The other thing I would say is that we do have other specific quality improvement programs that might relate to some of the topics that you've got. Certainly, any of the new quality improvement plan priorities that we've launched, we are looking very seriously at how might we support those priorities in the future through like learning collaboratives and other mechanisms. In fact, for some, we will probably make sure that there's an ideas offering embedded as part of that actually. But the goal will be to actually bring together people that are working on those issues, and the first one will be around some of the hallway healthcare related indicators. The other one that is also starting up, that we're starting with the Ontario Palliative Care Network, is really a community of practice for palliative care improvement, specifically around proactive identification of patients that might, and their assessment of needs for palliative care. So I would just say, like, we can help to make sure that you're aware of everything that is available and what's on offer. And the other way is within each of your regions, we've got leaders for quality. And they are trying to advance improvement. Many of them are working on something that relates to mental health care, I will say that. But many of them are also trying to address topics or issues that are very specific to that region of the population where we might see some variations in care. And so we have a quality improvement specialist and a clinical quality lead in each of those areas that I think would be an important connection point. They're very familiar with a lot of the providers in the area. They've got a great network of people, and they're also got great expertise in quality improvement. So like your ideas coach today, they're another resource that are also got just some great expertise that way. The last one I will say I really invite people to join is our monthly quality rounds. So we've tried to mimic kind of what you get when you get rounds in a hospital setting or other care setting, but we try to bring the quality community together once a month over the lunch hour virtually. You can just join on your computer or through an OTN site. The last couple we've had over 500 people attend each one. They tend to be good speakers. The next one is actually Sasha Bhatia talking about how we can use data the same way the NBA basketball players use data to improve quality. It's a fantastic talk. You can really draw some great parallels between sport and what we're trying to do in healthcare and with the data that we've got. Highly recommend that you join. I think it's on Tuesday, actually. So, I think that these are just ways to stay connected and ways to potentially contribute. And my experience over the last 4 years is as people come together that way, it tends to grow into even more, So we've got ways to connect you to that, and that's just some of the stuff that we're doing today through Health Quality Ontario, and we can imagine that there would be other mechanisms. That was a long answer, but... Are there any other comments or suggestions people may have?
I have a question for the group.
Yeah, go ahead, Danielle.
I don't know if this is on. I'll say it and then I can repeat it. Several of the teams here today focused on projects that were within their organization, but at some point they had to reach out and connect with a different organization or a different sector. And with the questions you asked before about what could we do more or less of, or what could we do differently to continue to support you, I wonder the nuance about working with with a different sector or a different organization, if there was anything that would be particularly helpful about that.
That's a great question. Any suggestions on that? I will say myself, having worked with a lot of the HealthLink teams over the years, I find it's quite a different approach to start trying to improve care across those different care settings, and it's a little even more complicated. We talk about the culture of an organization, or you talk about sort of the cultures within organizations. When you start trying to do that across organizations and professional groups, it becomes even more complex. Building trust at the outset is probably the most important part. Yeah, is there a comment over here?
Yeah, and I think you just said the key point. It's for us, as part of HealthLinks and as part of the LIN, working across the sectors, we've really focused on building relationships with our partners, really focusing on, what's important to that patient and all working towards those goals.
I think that's great. And then the toughest thing, right, is like, when do you know when the relationship is developed and you can get down, when you can get down to those concrete things that you want to implement, and what's the readiness to do it, isn't it? Yeah. Would people find more content related to that useful as you're going through the learning itself? Yeah? There's a few nods around the room. Okay, great. Any other suggestions for how we might keep you connected or support you as you continue? How many of you are feeling fairly confident that you'll be able to keep this work going in the environment that you're in? Yeah, well, that's good to see. A few not so sures. What's that? Yeah. That's good to hear. And I think that, I think Joe had called out a thank you as well to some of the executive sponsors that are here today. That's been something that we have found has been very enabling for teams, is when the executive sponsors have come on a day like today, but have also then stayed the champion back at the ranch as the work has continued afterwards. Yeah, go ahead.
Graduate from one of the earlier cohorts. One of the things that we have done is
Right. That's great. I'll be interested to see how it goes and how much easier it is to sort of really get it moving again. That's great. Any other suggestions or comments? All right. Oh, here we go.
Agnes, just a second.
And this could be ignorance on my part, simply because I wasn't really, I was just told to apply, our institution was told to apply for it, and the application happened behind the scenes. But what is, are there any funding or free training or anything like that available for organizations that may want to engage in projects like this, but financially just cannot pay upfront for training or opportunity like this, because it is fairly human resources intensive with time, and then on top of that, so we're just looking. I know some of the concerns that are coming up with making sure you spend your money where it's really where you can see it, intangible things. So this is a bit intangible for a lot of time. And then the other thing is, like, how can we? I know it's very acute care focused or very clinical focused interventions that are happening a lot of times through Quality Health Quality Ontario. Public health is very much, I'm happy to see 3 public health units, I think, represented here today, maybe 4, which is great, but I think it's fairly a minority. So I'm just looking forward to something that how other projects can be targeted a little bit at a larger population level.
That's great feedback, really good feedback. And I think on the funding side too, like, we've been giving a fair bit of thought to that as a program team. The team has developed some online learning modules that we're currently piloting in the north. We're still piloting them there. But I do think that we're starting to think about what combination of kind of online learning and kind of in classroom, in-person learning might be optimal, that might help in terms of some of the costs. I do think in terms of other things that people can access a little bit more easily is the Foundations program. I'm not sure if your teams would have tapped into that. So that's a 1.5 to 2-day learning program that's offered in different geographies around the province. So I think that's an easier way to kind of to get access. Your point about the clinical content, you're in a public health setting. I also think that we are starting to turn our mind more and more to how do we make sure that actually even the focus of the cohort has maybe got a more common focus or is addressing something that is needed across the health system and a little bit more. So I gave the example of the program that we might initiate around hallway healthcare that would relate to this. So then you're bringing teams together in something that's quite relevant with the case studies, everything that we could use with, coupled with the curriculum could be very relevant to that issue. So we can imagine, right, if you were doing something similar that might have a more public health bent or might have a different bent, people would be signing up knowing that, and that they would know that it would be very relevant. And that might make it easier, actually, when you're kind of within your organizations to sort of say, this is why we really need to do this. So we're giving a lot of thought to it, and so I really appreciate the feedback. We have had the feedback before about quite hospital-focused examples. Actually, what's been great, I would say, in the last 1.5 years or so, I feel like we've had a much more diverse group of teams coming through, and they actually serve as great case examples, right, for the future that we can start to lean on. So thank you for that. Any other comments? All right, well, I'm going to go back to where I began, which is today is celebratory. So congratulations to all of you. Really, this has been a phenomenal piece of work that you've done together. I know that you've leaned and worked with a lot on the ideas coaches that are part of this group, as well as the whole ideas team and teaching staff, et cetera. So, I just want to say, again, a huge thank you for you to committing to that. Thanks to them on my behalf for all the work that they've done to support you. Really wish you all the very, very best. Please stay connected. Please stay in touch. And have a wonderful trip home and a great long family day weekend. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Lee. Give me 5 minutes of your attention, and then we can split. All right, let's show some appreciation First to Jacob and Liv for taking photos. Second to our panelists. So we have Danielle and Virginia, and we have Rachel and Francine. Thank you very much for your excellent questions. Thank you again to the executive sponsors that are physically in the room. Really appreciate your support. And those of you out in the airwaves, thank you so much. In the true spirit of continuous improvement, we ran a test of change. So I want your feedback. So we used to have, what you did in Learning Session 2. The slide deck was 8.5 by 11. You'd stand up and you'd present and people could see your slide. So I need your feedback. So here's the question. Compared to your presentation in Learning Session 2, was today's better? Now first I'm going to ask you 2 times to stand up. If you think it was better as a presenter, today. If you think today was better as a presenter than what you did in Learning Session 2, please stand up. Give us your feedback. Jacob, are you counting? All right, so that means you preferred today's version to Learning Session 2. Okay, thank you. If, as an audience member, please stand up if you felt today's approach, where it was a speech, nothing was on the screen, was better than what we did in Learning Session 2. So again, please stand up if as a receiver of that presentation, you felt today was better. Please stand up. All right, thank you for that feedback. All right, so thank you. We're always experimenting. There's a reason we went for the poster because it serves other needs, but we'll rediscuss how it goes forward. All right, so as everybody said multiple times, today is not the end. It was just a point in time. Stay connected, many opportunities to stay connected. The biggest thing I want to leave you with is don't give up on quality improvement. Try another project. Try another thing. It doesn't always have to be an official project. Next time you go to work, you could just speak with your coworker and says, what about today we do it this way? Let's just do it for one patient. Let's do it for 1 hour and see how it goes. You only get better with practice, so please keep trying. Thank you so much for your efforts. Safe travels, and we'll stay in touch.